Hi, everybody. Welcome to Unpopular Front. My name's Ben Yudishin. I wanted to talk about something that I normally don't talk about. If you listen to some previous videos or episodes of mine, you would know that I'm not a sports guy. Never really was. I made a point of going to a high school where they didn't even have sports, where the most jock thing you could do was be in the ballet group or make pottery. So, maybe I'm not exactly the kind of jock, but there's one kind of sports that I know more about than I think the average person. And that's not the kind of sports that give you a traumatic brain injury, not the kind of sports that are going to break your arm or break your legs, but it is the kind of sports that might break your heart. And most of all, need you to get those weird gamer glasses. That's right, I'm talking about eSports. Yes, eSports is a growing part of the media. I think it's been that way for a while, and I'm just assuming, who knows, maybe eSports numbers are down. And, in my older age, and the fact that I'm not like 12 anymore, the kinds of video games that I play, I think, has changed. In some ways, maybe I'm reverting to the mean. But as I've gotten older, probably moved further away from kinds of games that maybe are as all consuming time and attention wise because, I've got a family, I've got responsibilities, I've got a job. I can't spend 12 hours a day grinding in World of Warcraft anymore. But I can still play my digital card games on my phone, right? And this story relates to my personal favorite digital card game, the one I sunk the most time and a decent chunk of money into, nothing crazy. That would be Blizzard Entertainment, or Activision Blizzard's offshoot of their Warcraft series, Hearthstone. Hearthstone is a very fun game to me. I've been playing it for pretty consistently for many, many years now. It's sort of a Magic the Gathering style, maybe a little bit more streamlined, more designed for the digital play versus sort of card based, like physical card based, which I think has its own place. And part of me wishes that was an option for Hearthstone, but it's not. And that's fine. But beyond the actual game, I think the much more interesting thing is about how their esports world has begun to interact more explicitly with a lot of the issues that we talk about on this show. I'm talking about issues like being pro-democracy, and not in the sort of vague way, but in the way of that I see a bunch of people who are not being represented. I want my values and input to be recognized if we're going to call ourselves democracies. And about the way that politics is not something you can just sort of silo away. There are no sidelines, there is no middle ground, and yes, you can't avoid politics. And politics, it has a lot of different formations all over the world. One of the things that I like about Hearthstone, and the only reason why I even vaguely follow the esports stuff, I don't really watch it, but I follow it because I play the game and I'm just curious. One of the most interesting things about games like Hearthstone, and a lot of sort of the really big PC games, and a lot of games made by Blizzard, the makers of Hearthstone, is its international interest. Blizzard in particular has a very strong connection throughout East Asia, particularly in the 90s and the 2000s with games like StarCraft. Many people sort of consider like Seoul to kind of be the mecca of esports because it was so ahead of the curve with mainstream adoption of viewing esports, playing games competitively. And I think a lot of this can even come back to not just basic sort of, oh, this just happened to happen at this time, and then like some sort of weird like Orientalist approaches that sort of exoticize this, which to me is exactly backwards to how you should be looking at it. Because the real sort of like the material reason why there was so much growth in interest in not card games, in online games, in eSports in South Korea is a lot of it based off of the history and the development of the economy and government in South Korea post-military dictatorship, especially sort of post the end of the Cold War. It was a country which had sort of very totalitarian control over sort of culture, and had a very sort of different approach to that than I think other countries in the region did, but also other quote Western capitalist liberal democracies. And I realize those are all that's all in scare quotes, tankies, watch out, whoa. But so that sort of, with the advent of a sort of quick rise of high-speed internet in South Korea, I think sort of helped begin the process of kind of an explosion throughout the region and then eventually throughout the world. Hearthstone is huge in Europe, it's huge in North America, it's huge in sort of in Asia, and it's especially huge in the largest part of Asia, you could say, the largest single area, single state, let's say, in Asia. They even have their own realm in Hearthstone. That would be the People's Republic of China. So, obviously, China is a huge part of the world. China has a lot of people. China is a huge consumer of these kinds of games. And there's a large amount of esports that come out of China and come out of sort of the sort of Mandarin, the greater Mandarin sort of Chinese world. And if you haven't been following it, there's been for months now a real, revolt in the, I guess, the state of Hong Kong. Sort of even what you classify Hong Kong in relationship to China at this point is kind of vague. Post sort of the British finally relinquishing their control and finally basically letting go of some of their oldest imperial holdings in the late 90s caused Hong Kong to sort of begin a process to reintegrate itself into mainland China, right? And part of this has been sort of a long simmering conflict that's just been building and waiting basically for a generation now. And after some instances of questions being risen in politics in sort of their society around sort of the right for mainland China, for Beijing, to control who gets extradited to mainland China for committing certain abuses, neither against the government or sort of against different kind of interests that make up the power base of China. I'm not going to get into the conversation as to whether China is socialist because I don't really know. And I'm sure there are people on both sides who have this is my both sides-ish. This is the only place where I'm like a radical centrist. And I think that shows to me that radical centrism is basically rooted in not knowing things because I don't really know. It's hard to tell. But I think a thing that you can't forget with this is that regardless of your opinions on China, regardless of your opinions on the interaction between Hong Kong and mainland China, and then the ways that the global capital is able to profit off of some of these divisions, and the way that they're able to use a very tightly controlled labor market and society in the form of China to help produce goods. And as China grows and becomes more economically developed, will also be a place for a greater market to sell things to. So I wanted to get to sort of bringing these two things together to talk about a professional professional gamer named Blitz Chung. His name's oh my god, Why Chung. I'm just gonna call him Blitz Chung because that's his name. So all of this context with China, Hong Kong, the history of that sort of global capital's incentives in this current development, and the continued riots and protest in Hong Kong, a lot of which has sort of become symbolized by people wearing gas masks or people wearing masks to hide their identity. There was a great viral tweet that went around of a girl who showed how to turn her hair into a mask. If I can figure out how to edit that video in, I'll do it. But it's become a symbol, and recently the government in Hong Kong, which has been relatively pro Beijing, has banned masks in public to be, I believe, you can go to prison for it, and so it has become a symbol of resistance to government tyranny, to centralized control, and not to make some of the super pro China people uncomfortable, but also of left wing critiques of the sort of whatever you want to call state capitalism, socialism with Chinese characteristics that defines China. It's important, I think, to remember for us on the left to note that there can be, even in ostensibly communist states, there absolutely can be issues that are incredibly similar to the ones that we deal with in our ostensibly capitalist states, right? There are issues like labor, there are issues like imperialism that I think we rightfully should be centering in how we deal with all of this. And a professional gamer named Blitz Chung, that's his name. His last name is actually Chung, so it's pretty close. He is a professional Hearthstone player. The dream I wish I could have, until I realized that then it means you can't fuck around on ladder so much. Regardless. But Hearthstone has, over the past, I think, about 6 months, they started this new series called Grandmasters, where they kind of pick out the sort of top players from all the different competitive scenes, and then they have them it's a constantly rolling season-based competitive series. And in the China region, Blitz Chung won $10,000 in prize earnings. Now, I don't really know what kind of deck he played. I hope he didn't play some degenerate aggro deck for all you Hearthstone fans out there. But, I didn't watch it. But he, in his post interview, came up and decided to wear a mask. Similarly to a lot of other athletes in history, from folks like Muhammad Ali, from the guys at the Mexico City Olympics putting it up, and even the whole story with the guys putting up the Black Power fist, and then the Australian guy who gave the glove in sort of an act of solidarity was also blackballed. It's a fascinating story. I highly recommend looking that up. And now, I don't know how well informed Blitz Chung is. I don't know. But he wore a mask. He spoke out in solidarity with the pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. And Blizzard said that they were not going to pay him his $10,000 prize earnings. That what he was doing went against the terms of service for participating in this tournament, and had made the Chinese government look bad. I mean, I think that's what a lot of it comes down to. And I think it's an important reminder of that these products that we play and these games that we play and these games that we like to watch others play are still operating within this sort of, global capital framework, right? And part of that in the current context, because China has so many people and so much power over things from the production of games to the, now a growing and very popular gaming culture and scene within mainland China, and their controls on internet access means that to operate within that context, these companies have to do this kind of action. Now, this is not to say that Blizzard is perfect or that Blizzard didn't do anything wrong. And I'm all for gamers getting pissed, about like actual stuff, not just that they made a character's boobs smaller, which actually happened recently in Hearthstone, and it was actually funny. I was like, this is a relatively mature fan base because most people were like, yeah, that makes sense. So that was kind of shocking to me, but regardless, this is from Bloomberg. This is that Activision Blizzard joins a number of international companies finding themselves embroiled in controversy around free speech linked to China. Luxury brands like Versace, Coach, and Givenchy have all fallen foul of Beijing's demands to refer to both Hong Kong and Taiwan as parts of its territory and not suggest they are independent nations. So, this meant that because Blitzchung gave the impression of Hong Kong as an independent nation and spoke out for that, the company, Blizzard, had no choice, according to them, but to do this. So, the question is, how then can we deal? Because, an issue with games, I think, and how it kind of fits into this, I would say, broader, almost like, imperial framework, is that, especially with things like online games, you need to have a very concentrated fan base, I think, and there needs to be a decent number of people playing it for it to matter and for it to be worth the time and the investment into caring about the game. And in that means those companies are probably going to have to be bigger companies. Those companies are going to have to be more more probably following the line of whatever government they're operating in. I'm not expecting Activision Blizzard to be the vanguard. If anything, they're the vanguard for all those fucking Call of Duty games, like the most like fucking American imperialist Michael Bay nonsense possible, and figuring out how we operate within this context, as game players and as people who maybe view esports, and as these things become more global, that's one of the beautiful things about esports, is how easily global it is. There is going to be there are going to be these events, and there are going to be these moments of contrast where we're going to have to make a choice, And I think Blizzard should give Blitzchung his money. And at the very least, let him go off in peace, But this is the problem and this is the challenge with international media and with international sports. And I don't know what's going to happen next, but stay tuned to Unpopular Front for more.